co-founders. We were 6 people at the beginning, and since the beginning I'm the president of this organization. And yeah, for that, first I need to introduce maybe what I'm doing, so you know who is talking to you. And afterwards I go into the journey of all the many decisions that we have taken as a team to make Sichtlich to what it is today. Now, that's my CV on one page. So I'm a person with a technical education. I have a PhD on cyber security and cryptography. So basically a computer scientist. And I studied at ETH Zurich in Switzerland. After my master's, I went to Silicon Valley to work in the research lab at Hewlett Packard. That's why I see the Golden Gate Bridge there. Then I came back to ETH Zurich for my PhD on cybersecurity and cryptography. And then I was hired into Google, officially into Zurich, but they sent me straight to California to do all the bootcamp training for 3 months. And then I came back and had to build up the first cybersecurity unit for Google in Europe. And then also the first data privacy engineering team for Google globally. So I was always on the technology side, so I had software engineers working with me. And the problems we were solving at Google were all global. So we built new security and data privacy features into all about 160 different services, one of which, for example, you know, as YouTube or Gmail. And you had hundreds of millions of active users, and you had 0 downtime, so you could not reboot the system. You had to change it while it was flying. It was a cool challenge, and so I liked to scale up things. Google Zurich was growing from like 40 people when I joined to 1,400 in just 7 years. We opened offices in Poland, 2 of them, and 2 offices in Israel at the same time, and Zurich was hiring like crazy. And it was a very good journey. I learned a lot about how to grow stuff, how to do it quickly, how to build teams, how to build a culture, how to motivate people to do more than they ever thought. And all of that was done in teams. Nobody was working alone in that organization. You always had people around you. And the best thing is, I had so many people which were much better than I was at Google. I could learn a lot on the journey. It was really great ride, but then after 7 years I decided to quit because I found out Google had 1,400 people at the time. For me, it was a large corporation. And I liked this start phase, the family groove, having an idea, making it real in a team of like 10, 20 people. And this was my sweet spot, creating something from scratch, where we had the biggest challenges, the biggest uncertainties, and this is exactly what startups do. They have a few great founders, and then they try to change the world with almost no resources. And what happened out of that is I became a co-founder of 9 startups, 8 in software, 1 in hardware. One is a 3D printing company, the rest is basically software for businesses or consumers. And I, of course, also invested. And I was lucky enough to, while I was at Google, that a colleague came to me and said, hey, why don't you invest in my startup? I said, I don't know, what does it mean, invest in a startup? I'm a computer scientist, so what should I know about investing? And I don't, you just need to trust my team and my idea, and if you believe it's right, just give me the money, you know? Very simple, everybody can invest. And at that time, of course, I had no clue about how it works. Like, I've never seen a convertible note, I've never seen a term sheet. So we had a very simple agreement, basically, yeah, I get some shares and that was it. And I didn't even ask for any minority protection rights and anything, because just trusted the guy and I knew he could do it, and he had 2 other people in the same team. And yeah, so it ended up quite well. This was Spontact. It was a social network for expats, and it was sold less than 2 years after incorporation to the Scout24 group. So we built it, we launched it in Zurich, 25,000 active users in Zurich, and then we expanded to Germany, and at time of expansion we got bought. And then I figured, if it's so easy, I should do a little more investments. Because I had to sell all my shares, so I had no startups anymore. I couldn't say I have a startup. It was so cool to say I have a startup. I had to sell it, so I didn't have it anymore. So then I started to do more. And I joined forces with others which also had an exit. So we were 4 people in a tiny group of 4 people. And we just made 1 interview in Bilanz, which is the largest finance magazine in Switzerland. We said, we're going to finance the best founders in Switzerland for 2 years, just the 4 of us. And then you're going to find a VC who gives you much more money than what we have, and we make it a success with you. And we got 100 business plans after this 1 interview, because everybody had an exit. And that was quite unique in Switzerland, that you had a startup exit. And 2 of the 4, they had their own company, and the others, they were investors and had an exit, which was also good, of course. And out of that, basically, yeah, we had this tiny club, but somehow it didn't really work because one of them got the baby, the other one could sell the rest of his company and then went on world travels, and suddenly it was just basically me and the other guy, and he didn't have any more time anymore, it was just me yet. I thought that's not a cool club before if only one actually does stuff. And then we had two people we really wanted to finance the company with, but kind of nobody else in the team had the time to do so. And said, I also don't have time, I work full time at Google, what do you think? Okay, you can have the money and run, but that's not good enough, right? And then I said, no, I will quit Google and basically spend my time with the startups. So I quit Google in the same year, I incorporated 3 startups. 2 of them I was having an operational role, Chief Technology Officer and Chief Security Officer, to basically learn how it is to be in a startup. After 2 years I found out it's amazing, but I cannot work for 2 startups. I'm not Elon Musk who works for 3 or 4. I can work for 1 if I'm operational. And said, okay, but I don't want to work just for 1. I want to work for many of them. And then I decided I will go into the board of the startups and just support them strategically with my network and of course with funding. And then I found out there's not enough money because all these startups need more and more money. They just burn it and they need more. And if you don't have enough investors, you cannot grow, right? And that's why basically I decided we need a club which invests into technology startups. Now at that time, Switzerland was not a technology startup nation. Let's look at it, how it looked like in that time. So this is how it looked in 2014, number of amount of invested capital in Switzerland. So Switzerland was a biotech, medtech country. This is how many millions, like 200 million investments in a single year flowing into Swiss startups, and most was going into biotech and medtech. The problem is I understood nothing about biotech and medtech. I was the ICT guy, information communication technology. And then it was also clean tech, but that was basically too small to even look at it. And then I asked my friends, hey, ICT, isn't it cool? Let's invest in software startups. And then the answer was like, hey, Thomas, you're completely crazy. I mean, just because you work for Google doesn't mean Switzerland is a country for software startups. And internet bubble burst 2000, 2001. Many Swiss investors lost money in software industries. The IPOs didn't work out. You can only lose money with software startups. And look at the last 10 years. No good exits. I mean, you're like in the desert doing something which nothing will grow here in software startups. But I felt we have everything it needed. We have great talent. With cloud computing, you just rent the resources, don't need upfront investments to buy a data center. You can just rent it. You have 0 distribution costs globally. In the end, you need great ideas and great teams, and we had that in Switzerland. Just the problem is nobody was risking it and doing it. And I said, if you make it easier for people to do it, many more people will follow. But I was totally alone with that, I felt. Everybody was telling I'm stupid, I'm going against everybody else's opinion that we're a biotech, medtech country. But anyway, I said, let's try. Because if you never try, you don't know what it works, right? Now what happened, so City was founded in 2014, and I also don't know how the future looks like. But I said, look, I don't care how the future looks like, I'm going to create it. Because I think we have everything it needs to bring us to the next level. Let's see, it doesn't switch, so it's no switching apparently. So yeah, I saw the potential. A lot of people which came out of universities, they could do it, but they just went straight to banks and insurance companies and large corporates instead of working on their own ideas. And so based on that vision that we have the potential, but it's not realized, I just said, let's do it. Now, what happened? This is invested capital and number of financing rounds. What happened over the next 9 years? Look at that. Everything went up. Pretty crazy. So from about 300 million investments back in 2012, it was a 10-fold increase over 10 years to 3 billion. Money flowing into Swiss startups. Now most of that money does not come from Switzerland. 14% comes from Switzerland. 86% comes from somewhere else in the world, but it flows into Swiss startups. And that's another thing people told me, you cannot grow in Switzerland because there's no growth money in Switzerland. I said, I don't care because the market of my software startups is global and the VC scene is global. I don't care whether I get the money from Zurich or from San Francisco. In the end, they need money, and money doesn't stink if it comes from San Francisco. We need the money from the right parties and need to understand risk, and that's a good partnership. And this is how it worked. So the ecosystem just exploded, basically. Now, what does it mean for us? It's really slow when I click here. So this is the whole ecosystem mix. So suddenly fintech and ICT became more relevant than medtech and biotech. You find the statistics all in the Swiss Venture Capital report, but the funny thing is that if you look at that, half of the money in last year went into fintech and ICT out of the 3.1 billion. That's pretty crazy. And this is the mix where it went. So you see really like ICT and fintech almost the same size, and lots of growth financing rounds. Of course, as I said, money doesn't come from Switzerland in growth financing rounds, it comes from Switzerland in the very early days. And we still are also a biotech country, as you can see, like the third largest one is in biotech, or just behind fintech, actually between ICT and fintech is biotech still. So this is how Switzerland evolved since we started. But at the very beginning, as I said, we're completely the outlier. We said our angel club invests only in software startups. Where there was no success story, nothing, it was just stories about the internet bubble crash, and yeah, not a lot of people believed in us. This is what happened. So it took us about a year to bootstrap from 2014 to October 2015. We had an association built, we had a few pitching events, but we had no investor community. And in October 2015, we had taken all the many decisions, which I'm going to run you through in a second. And we said, okay, now we know how we're going to build it, such that it's built for scale up and growth, because we wanted to do a few things differently than other clubs did it, because we believe that we need a different approach a little bit than others did it. Now, this is the growth of members. The funny thing is it's almost linear. Of course, it's not a hockey stick, but for an angel club, adding roughly 80 people net every year is quite an achievement in tiny Switzerland. So we ended up with 502 active investors end of last year. And our goal size was always around 400 to 500, because at that size we thought with the number of deals we could finance all the good ones. And so let's see. Our goal is currently not to go to 1,000, it's to stay around 500, but increase the quality and activity and other things that they have. So now we invest a lot into education of angels. So we want to really have the angels to have the best part is the smart money that they bring. We do not just want more money, we want even better money, basically. And we have 55 women in our club and 447 men. As you see, there's a little balance problem here. We try to motivate all the women to try it out, but it's quite hard because very few women are in tech, and even less women are in tech and in investing. Same with the startup founders, less than 10% startup founders that come to us are female. We would love to have more, but if you look at ETH Zurich computer science study, less than 15% women studying it. What do you expect what happens with founders afterwards if you already cut out 85% in a study, right? So it's a problem which is downstream, so we just see the problem at the very end, but for solving it, we need to go back and motivate people when they join basically grammar school, that they want to go into mint technology stuff. So that's a thing we cannot easily correct, but we still hope that it will get more diverse. Now, City has invested in 200 companies so far. This is the split of what they have invested in. FinTech is 18%, the largest chunk. Then internet platforms, machine learning startups, health tech, and many others. And 2/3 are in business to business, so they sell to other corporates. And then a smaller chunk, 20%, sells to consumers, B2C startups, and the rest is a mix of everything. Well, you see, basically, it's a lot about financial technologies, a lot about platforms, and it's mostly business to business. I think Switzerland is not very good in consumer products. One of the reasons is we're not very cheap. We don't have cheap labor. If you need support people, you don't even find them, and if you find them, they're too expensive, and you cannot do it from here. And we're also not known to have the cheapest products on the planet. Typically, we have high quality, high reliability, sophisticated products, but not simple, stupid, cheap stuff. It's just not in the DNA, I guess, of most people, especially not those which came out of university. And that's why currently we see mostly startups solving very complex business problems. But it's also good because if you are in B2B, you need many less people in a startup because you don't need a gigantic support team and a gigantic marketing team and so on. You have very few customers at the beginning, you have just big corporates, but each of them pays you a lot. So you can easily make a couple million revenues with just 20 customers. You don't need hundreds of thousands of customers. So that's actually an advantage. For Switzerland, if you have really great talent, and they can solve very complex problems, you have to serve many less customers, and you can still earn decent money. If you do it the other way around, you make it cheap and go broad, you have very different problems because you need a lot of marketing budget, it's very hard to get, by the way, here, and you need many more people. So this is what Switzerland is strong, I would say. It's mostly B2B startups which solve complex problems. Now, the others, it's not just one thing. Switzerland is super diverse. You have everything from cybersecurity, educational technologies, property technologies, big data, legal tech, IoT, drones, robotics. You have pretty much everything you can think about. We're not like Israel, mostly cybersecurity focused. Switzerland is almost everything. And that's actually very good because if you're an angel investor, you always find something which you like. If you hate fintech, not a problem, you have 80% other stuff. So you can really pick and choose whatever you know best, and whichever industry you come from as an angel investor, you always find a startup which needs customers in your vertical. So you can always help one of the startups. That's a big, big strength of Switzerland that we're so diverse. So I'm not sure why it doesn't sometimes flip.
I was always too fast yesterday.
Maybe I need to go closer. So let's go one back. Sorry. Now it's flipped for too late, so here we go. This is a small selection of our startups where our investors at 60 have invested. The very first investment we did was Get Your Guide. It's now a unicorn. They do travel. Then we have two Soonicorns. They have valuations over 300 million already. That's why they call them soon to be a unicorn. And we have many others which already were sold. Carbon Delta is a specific cool case. They calculate climate risks for stock-quoted companies to tell you how much exposed their assets are if the climate has an adverse change. And they were sold within less than 2 years to MSCI, which is just the MSCI World Index, whatever. Now there's the MSCI Climate Index, which every portfolio manager wants to look at if you don't want to have too much climate risk in their portfolio. It was a cool company. They were researchers. They had no clue what to sell it to. They wrote research reports. They were getting some grants, but they couldn't really grow. And then we gave them 1.7 billion. We hired them a sales team. We built them the business case to sell to portfolio managers, and we added an entrepreneur into the board, in addition to the 3 scientists that they had in the board. And then, as soon as they had the first customers, MSCI was knocking on the door, please, I would like to buy you. They were a distribution partner of some of the data, and they immediately saw the big business. We had data about the climate risk, which nobody else had. Everybody wanted to know more about how can you quantify climate risk, and Carbon Delta had the data. Anyway, don't go into all of this, but the cool thing is, yes, we do have exits, because if you only invest and never get money back, your angels become paralyzed. They want to invest, but they cannot, because now all the money they had put aside for startups is in the startups. And then they stop investing, and then it's not a useful angel anymore, because they don't get more experience, they don't get more exposure, and they become slightly unhappy, because it's like, yeah, you know, I would love to invest, but I cannot. So the earlier you have exits, the better. It doesn't always need to be a gigantic exit, but it needs to return more money than what you put in, otherwise it's charity and not an investment. Sometimes you have startups, they come to us and say, look, it's for a good cause. I said, yeah, it's amazing, but you know, we're an investor club, we're not a charity. If you want to do it for a good cause, there's foundations in Switzerland, they do multi-billion-dollar transactions also, and you don't expect anything back than an impact on society. But with the investor club here, the goal is a very different one. We build large sustainable businesses. We want to solve complex problems, and we don't want to just give money away, and when the money stops, the mission stops. In our case, we give the money to start the mission, and then the mission should become self-sustainable and be able to grow, right? That's the whole idea of an angel club. But sometimes it's hard to explain why investors want to invest in anything that looks like an investable target. Yeah, and some of them are now scheduled for IPOs, by the way. Now, returns is important, I told you. The problem is most of the exits we cannot talk about because it's under non-disclosure agreements. Often the buyer doesn't want anyone, especially not the competition, to know how much they paid. That's why in many, many cases, there's no figures about how much did somebody earn with this exit. Now, with Contavista, I really was begging them really hard to at least be able to put the relative numbers up. We couldn't give the absolute numbers, but this got formal approval from the buyer. So there were 3 financing rounds, one around incorporation, the pre-seed one. You see the holding time 4.5 years, and the multiple 32.9 times. So if you put in 100,000, you get 3.2 million back, not that bad. Then the seed round, and then the A round. The A round was shortly before the buyer came along and wanted to buy it. So overall, the rounds on average was about 8x multiple. And with that, of course, you can now invest into many more startups. The nice thing with this was I was one of the founders, so not the worst deal ever. It helped me a lot to invest into many more, and I had other people which then together we actually co-founded Zictic, which were also on that deal. Which meant we have already proven we can build a highly scalable company, and we can sell it, in this case was 4.5 years until exit. We can sell it in a reasonable amount of time, we don't need to wait 20 years. And that proof of the pudding, that you do not just talk about success, but actually you can show it in figures, was very important to a lot of people that wanted to start angel investing, especially after the internet bubble burst and all this negativity was in the press. We had some success cases.
Sorry, Thomas.
Yes, question.